And we've got Jonathan Williams from the American Legislative Exchange Council here to discuss with us as the Chief Economist and Executive Vice President of Policy there, to talk with us about tax policy. Jonathan, are you there?
Well, good morning and greetings from the land of make-believe out here in Washington, D.C.
Okay, there you go. Thanks for calling in. We really appreciate you being here with us. And I'm glad that you got an extra hour of sleep, hopefully, as it's 7:43 there instead of 6:43. But we really appreciate you calling, and we had Grover Norquist on in our last couple segments, and we've been discussing tax policy. And we're discussing tax policy as we see states around Missouri either go to zero in their personal income or commit to going to zero, incredibly commit to going to zero in their personal income tax rates. And I think tax is incredibly exciting. I think tax policy is riveting stuff, but I also understand why it can be a little bit dry. And so the goal here is to not only get into some of the details of tax policy for our listeners here now, but also to maybe breathe some life into, I think, a policy front that is often misunderstood, and often misunderstood because the scope of it isn't fully gathered.
Well, you're exactly right. And first off, Bishop, thank you for your great work in Jeff City on these topics for a long time, and trying to continue to work to make Missouri more competitive, given these dynamics that you just talked about in surrounding states and states all across the country. Coming out of the artificial government lockdowns and the COVID pandemic and all these Biden bucks that have been in state capitals, we have seen an incredible tax cut revolution, not really predicated by the Biden bucks at all, but it certainly aided the surpluses. We've seen money sloshing around, and states had to make a really critical decision. They were at an inflection point, maybe one in a generation inflection point that we've seen, at least on fiscal policy in the last 3 or 4 years, which is, do you grow the size and scope of government with these surpluses, or do you give those surpluses back to hardworking taxpayers who actually fueled the surpluses by working hard and getting out there and reopening? And so that's been, I think, one of the biggest stories. And of course, the mainstream media in New York and Washington completely ignore this story. But we've had 25 states substantially cut taxes over the last several sessions, and most of it's been focused on personal income tax and business income tax, things that matter for growth. And that's really the key story here, Bishop, is that, as you know well, this isn't just about putting marginal tax rates up on a chalkboard and talking about the merits of one versus another. We're talking about how states can absolutely change their trajectory and become growth states. I write the book Rich States, Poor States every year with Art Laffer, Reagan's Economist, and Steve Moore. And this is all about how states grow, how states can succeed, and how, at an individual level, we can have a much more prosperous community, a healthy community that keeps our kids and our grandkids in the community if we get it right when it comes to things like tax policy.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And we appreciate the work that you guys do because it does start to illuminate. And the data gets really hard to refute, right? You start looking at and naming off the states that have made these moves. Could you tell us, why is it that we talk about personal income? Why is it we talk about corporate income? And in Missouri, we're really focusing on personal income. But why is it that we talk about those forms of taxation more than we talk about a sales tax, or more than we talk about a real estate tax, or whatever the case may be?
Well, when it comes to competitiveness, right, and one of the things that we track in Rich States, Poor States is just how much Americans are voting with their feet and moving across state lines. This, as you pointed out, the evidence is irrefutable now that people are continuing and have been leaving high-tax states. Maybe your best economic development partner in the Midwest, Illinois, who continues to hemorrhage out individuals and businesses out of Illinois because of high taxes and poor business environments, to go to places that embrace economic freedom, that give individuals a better quality of life at a lower cost of living. And, that's one of the key takeaways, is all taxes matter from our research, but some matter more than others. And so in this race to be competitive and to attract businesses and attract individuals, we need those policies, especially on the personal and business income tax side, to be right, because in our research, we find that those matter dollar for dollar more than those other types of taxes when it comes to attracting businesses and attracting jobs and attracting Americans voting with their feet, voting with their pocketbook. And that's why I think it's no surprise we've seen so many states focus on that personal income tax and business income tax side. One little known fact about this, you know well, Bishop, that a lot of people I think maybe forget that the vast majority of new jobs, new businesses that are startups and created across the United States in the last decade or two have been created by small businesses and startups. And the vast majority of those mom and pop small businesses, those NFIB members that are working hard all over the country, they file on the individual side of the income tax. And so focusing on the personal income tax, not just for wage income, but I think just as importantly, maybe even more importantly for growth, that small business entrepreneur startup that is paying on the individual side of the code. And until they start to be successful, there's a very real chance that many of them will go under. And if we can remove one of those huge barriers to success, like the income tax, that makes states that much more attractive.
No, I appreciate you laying it out for us like that. Jonathan Williams, who is the Chief Economist and Executive Vice President of Policy at ALEC, is on the line with us. And Jonathan, I believe we have you for one more segment. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, well, we will be right back, guys. You're listening to 104.1 KSGF. Welcome back to Mornings with Nick Reed. This is State Representative Bishop Davidson filling in for Nick Reed now. And we're talking with Jonathan Williams, the Chief Economist and Executive Vice President of Policy over at ALEC, continuing on our tax discussion. To give you a little bit of an overview and to refresh you, Jonathan, as well, the legislation we've been working on in Missouri that I've had the privilege of filing would take the growth that comes from our surpluses and put it in a fund and then use that growth to trigger down decreases in our income tax in a responsible way that sets us on the path towards zero and does so without breaking the bank in the process. We could call that the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. In Colorado, there's a similar policy, Jonathan, as I know you're very aware of. I'm wondering, how could a TABOR sort of piece of legislation, I know they do it a little bit differently, but a TABOR legislation help here in Missouri?
Well, it's a great question. It's one of my favorite topics because, to get it right on the tax side, your idea there on, buying down the tax rate over time with, spending surpluses, I think is a great way to do it. And we're seeing Kentucky, for instance, they're under current law going to zero on their personal income tax, taking a trigger approach like that. I was just testifying in Louisiana last week where the new governor, Jeff Landry, has a plan to go to a flat tax and then personal income tax phase out. So we're seeing states across the country embrace that, I think, really incredible approach. And Colorado is a great case study. 1992, Colorado voters put it in their state constitution that government should not grow faster than the private sector. Kind of a novel concept, not rocket surgery, as Art Laffer, my co-author, likes to say. Basic economics is you can't grow spending faster than production in the economy. And so TABOR in the Constitution, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, says government can't grow faster than population plus inflation growth. And over now 30 years in Colorado, even as Colorado has politically transformed from a red state reliably to purple to probably fairly reliable blue these days, voters continue to say we want spending limits in our Constitution. And it's been an incredible thing that has really saved Colorado from becoming California East when it comes to bad policies, because it caps that growth of government and keeps things limited. And we have a great website for folks to check out, fiscalrules.org, that we at ALEC have put together that, you take a state like Missouri and say, if you wanted to adopt a spending limit like Colorado's, and let's say you did it in 1992, what would that have meant in overall savings to taxpayers to take your approach, Bishop, and to actually reduce taxes with that? And as it turns out, based on these calculations, every person in the state of Missouri, if TABOR was implemented in Missouri in 1992, would now be $25,700 richer and having more money in their pocketbooks. That's the savings per person if Missouri would have taken that approach of Colorado back in 1992. So we're not talking about small amounts here. We're talking about transformational change in savings for taxpayers across the board.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredible. And I think once you start putting it in numbers, in our last segment, Grover had said that your world gets smaller right? When the income tax is increased or is increasing or is even existent. And I think your numbers actually kind of put that into focus of how a person's world actually gets smaller, what they're able to do, what they're able to pursue, what dreams they're able to accomplish. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work you guys do.
Well, thank you. It's important work. We're going to continue it. And it's a personal story for me. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, Saginaw, Michigan, that this has happened, where Michigan got policy wrong for a long time. Saginaw went from 100,000 people to now under 50,000 people in the city. And when you live in a scenario like that, and you've seen St. Louis go through this, you've seen cities across Missouri go through similar things with that depopulation, with no opportunity and no jobs. You see those incredibly talented young people coming up through your K-12 system and even graduating through great universities that I know you have in Missouri as well, and then going to, let's say, Texas or Tennessee or Florida, in a state that gets it right when it comes to job opportunities. And it's just crushing and heartbreaking, and you lose really a lot of the soul of your state and community when you lose people like that and lose those opportunities. So that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan Williams from ALEC, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate you giving some texture and some research to this. I look forward to working with you. I think you'll be in Missouri here within the next month or so, and I think there's a round table that I'm going to participate in with you. So I look forward to catching up with you more at that time too.
Well, likewise. Keep up the great work, Bishop, and really best wishes to the great hardworking taxpayers of Missouri. I know you got leaders like you that are looking to turn things around, so appreciate it.
Thank you for that. We really appreciate it.